Arthur here hopes everyone out there had as good of a Christmas as he did. He got a new LSU food bowl and a new Orleans Saints water bowl for the new year. Today, we're previewing the Tigers Texas Bowl matchup against the Baylor Bears. I'm Ruddy Rutledge, and this here is some Bayou football. Welcome all to episode 14 of the Bayou Football Video Podcast. I am Ruddy Rutledge, and he is the main character, Arthur the Bayou Party Dog. The college football playoff picks back up again Tuesday night, New Year's Eve, with the first ever national quarterfinal game. But that afternoon, before Boise meets Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl, many folks around the country will likely be taking their pregame naps to the soothing sounds of the Texas Bowl in Houston, which pits the 8-4 LSU Tigers against the 8-4 Baylor Bears. First things first. If LSU wanted a better bowl game, then they shouldn't have let a 6-loss USC team beat them out in Vegas. Or they shouldn't have blown a 17-7 halftime lead to Texas A&M. Or maybe they shouldn't have let Bama quarterback Jalen Milroe resemble the second coming of Lamar Jackson for the second time in as many years. Or they shouldn't have gone to the swamp and looked like hot garbage in almost every phase of the game. But they did all of those things, and so here we are. You reap what you sow. The Tigers are coming into this one in the midst of an overhaul of their roster for the 2025 season. Head coach Brian Kelly has brought in 14 highly sought-after transfer players for next season, and many of them have enjoyed success in the SEC. But this one final game will go on to the 2024 record, and with a number of opt-outs, transfers, and NFL declarations, this will hardly resemble the LSU team we've been watching all season. Offensive tackles Will Campbell and Emory Jones both declared early for the NFL draft, and they will not be playing. The Tigers will also be without starting wide receiver Kyron Lacey, who, as a senior, opted out for the bowl game. They will be without tight end Mason Taylor, who, like the two tackles, declared early for the NFL draft. And starting safety Major Burns, according to LouisianaSports.net, is MIA for bowl prep in Houston and will not be playing either. On top of all that, the Tigers lost 17 other transfer portal opt-outs. All these various labels for just saying, I'm out, are kind of exhausting. But the transfer number, the sheer number of it, the 17, is a bit of a misleading stat, since only 2 starters for the Tigers fall into that group, wide receiver C.J. Daniels and defensive back Sage Ryan. The others who have jumped into the portal are all reserve players. To quote Curly Bill in Tombstone, well, bye. In my view, the losses of Sage and Major could end up being addition by subtraction for LSU. Let's be real, neither one is exactly what you'd call a game changer, at least not in a good way. And their absences in the defensive backfield should allow the Tigers to get some of these younger guys in there at safety. Javian Toviano and Deshaun Spears come to mind first. But for all these absences, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier will be in action in Houston, following his announcement that he will be back to lead the Tigers in 2025. And LSU will also have the services of their best wideout this past season, Aaron Anderson. As for Baylor, first thing that comes to mind when you think about this matchup is the Bears head coach, Dave Aranda, who, as most LSU fans know good and damn well, has quite the big connection to the Tiger program. But more on him in a bit. A lot more. Baylor in 2024 lost 4 out of 5 early on this season, 3 in a row at one point, like LSU. But unlike LSU, the Bears ended their season on a 6-game winning streak. Their offensive output increased dramatically over the course of the streak, and the Bears picked up tough wins over Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU, and West Virginia. Given Baylor's resurgence in the second half of the season, all signs point to this game being very, very tough for LSU. Unlike the Tigers, Baylor has not been hit with opt-outs for this game. Just one Bear, offensive tackle Alvin Ebiselli, is a transfer portal absence. So the Bears will have nearly all hands on deck when they take on the Tigers, which is quite the rare occurrence for a non-playoff bowl game in today's all-about-me era. The Bears are led on defense by their head coach, Aranda, who took over defensive play calling this season. But again, it was the Bears' offense that sparked this 6-game winning streak. Sawyer Robertson took over quarterbacking duties in Week 3, and he's been on a tear ever since. In fact, he finished 3rd in the Big 12 in passer rating and tossed 26 touchdowns. Robertson's rise is the single biggest reason for Baylor's turnaround this season. And if LSU is going to win, the Tigers are going to have to put this guy on his butt early and often. And yes, fortunately for LSU, top pass rusher Braden Swinson will be playing. But Tiger defensive coordinator Blake Baker is also going to have to defend the Baylor rushing attack. The Bears average 188 yards per game on the ground and almost 5 yards a carry. So, kind of a tough row to hoe for LSU in this game, especially with all these opt-outs and transfers and NFL declarations. But I'm still hopping on the Nuss bus. Already bought my ticket. It will be tough with all the absences, but I'm predicting the Tigers will ride the arm of their gunslinger to a New Year's Eve victory. Much like in last year's bowl game against Wisconsin, Nuss gets it done in the fourth quarter, and LSU wins it 31-28. New Orleans Saints. Don't even want to talk about them today. Their 34-0 Monday Night Football loss to the Green Bay Packers last week brought this pathetic team to yet another new low. Only shutout in the NFL this season. Not only did the team look completely inept in every phase, but you had ESPN commentator Troy Aikman on the broadcast proclaiming to the world that the Saints have kicked the rebuild can down the road for far too long. And then, on the other hand, you have a general manager in Mickey Loomis who refuses to acknowledge this very true narrative and refuses to acknowledge the fact that he made an awful head coaching hire in Dennis Allen. The Saints are presently losing again to the nutless Vegas Raiders at home right now at the time of this recording. But given the pathetic state of this team and the fact that the Tigers are playing their final game of the season this week, I'm moving on to the final segment. But we will cover the Saints in great detail in coming episodes. Arthur, get back in your chair. Come on. Okay, earlier I mentioned that I would discuss the Baylor head coach. As most Tiger fans know, his name's Dave Aranda, and he was LSU's defensive coordinator from 2016 through 2019. And he helped coach the Tigers to their epic national championship run back in 19. Why did I save Aranda until now, you may wonder? Well, about a year after my niece came into the world, I realized I had somewhat of an aptitude for storytelling. Story time with her Uncle Ruddy is something my niece now loves, and so I thought I would apply it here today during this odd time between Christmas and New Year's, to a relevant topic, of course. So please sit back and enjoy, because it's story time with Uncle Ruddy. This one is called The Elves and the Football Maker. One day, way up north in the frozen, barren, college football championship devoid land of Wisconsin, a man named Dave the Football Maker, lived and worked his trade. Dave was extremely talented at two things: the craft of making footballs and coaching defense. He was also smart and a really hard worker. He brought an innovative style of football making and coaching to the table, but for some reason, no one seemed to notice his talent, and he, his wife, and their children stayed poor for a long time. Dave dreamed of coaching his own football team one day and being able to make footballs for them, but it seemed he was stuck in Wisconsin, pun intended, and no one would ever notice his skills. One evening, after another long, hard day at work, Dave realized he was miserable. He was utterly miserable. He threw his tools down, quit working on the football he was putting together that day, and threw his hands up in frustration. And then he left his shop. He was weary, not only of being poor, but of being unnoticed. Because you see, if a really good team of footballers could somehow find out about Dave and his talents, then he'd be able to take a job with that team and he would earn more coins. So that night, when Dave went to bed, he prayed to the football god to help his poor, hungry family. He prayed, and he prayed. And wouldn't you know, the next morning, Dave went back to his football-making shop, and he found the football he had been putting together the day before, but it was finished, completed. Someone had come into Dave's shop and finished making the football for him overnight while he was gone. But instead of the traditional logo of the Wisconsin team Dave worked for, the logo of the Badger, the newest football had a different logo on it. The logo on the side of the ball was that of the tiger head, and it looked eerily similar to the logo of a football team Dave was very familiar with, the famous Fighting Tiger team from Louisiana, located far away down to the south in Bayou Land, near the Southern Sea. Dave quickly determined that this was a magic football. Dave had always secretly wanted to make footballs for Louisiana. Its footballers had a reputation for their athletic talent, but also for their ferocity and for playing with their big, huge balls. Footballs. But in recent years, the team had fallen on hard times. The Louisiana footballers lost their luster. Their balls had not only shrunk, but their quality greatly declined. And so declined the reputation of Louisiana's once feared team of Fighting Tiger footballers. Dave, meanwhile, took this new magic football and used it as a template of sorts, a model, a guide. He started to make more magic footballs, as close to this new football of his as he could make them. And like the original magic football, they were all bigger than normal, big balls. And the Wisconsin team won many games playing with Dave's big balls. Dave continued on with this for a few years until one day he received a raven with a message from the football team way down in Louisiana. The message stated that Louisiana footballers had been watching Dave from afar. They watched his Badger team on TV often, and they loved the way his balls looked on TV, his footballs. But they also loved the way he coached the game, and they wanted him to come make magic footballs for them and to coach their defense. Dave would be making a lot more coins than he'd ever made before. He'd now be able to provide more for his wife and family, which is what he'd always wanted. Plus, working a job on a big stage like this would also give Dave a platform to go for his dream job, running his own football team. So Dave accepted Louisiana's offer and moved his family the long distance, and they took up residence inside Louisiana's great castle, a pantheon of concrete and steel, not far from the southern sea, rising up from the banks of the great river, the same river that flowed all the way up to Dave's former home in Wisconsin. And so Dave made magic footballs and coached defense for Louisiana. And he earned more coins than he'd ever earned before. And his sons and daughters were hungry no more. But things still weren't quite right for Dave. He wasn't completely happy in his work. His footballers were winning games, but he was still no more than a well-paid apprentice. The team was not his own by any account. Moreover, he still didn't know who came up with the magic football-making technique he was now using. Who was it, Dave continued to wonder, who was it that came into his shop that night years ago back in Wisconsin and made that very first magic football in the new way, the new method that Dave had merely adopted? So Dave prayed again to the football god, not for a blessing, but for answers to this most pressing of questions. Who came into his shop that night and made that very first special magic football? And again, almost immediately, Dave received his answer. You see, 3 magical elves, all of whom secretly now played football, in disguise, of course, for Dave's new team in Louisiana, they were the ones who had visited his shop that night in Wisconsin. And how did Dave find this out, you may ask? Well, on the night of Dave's most recent prayer to the football god, he got up later that night to take his 3 a.m. dump. And that is when 3 elves hopped down out of the shower stall and revealed themselves to him. And he was terrified at the sight of them. But the elves assured Dave he need not be afraid, for they bring to him tidings of great joy that shall be unto all the Wait, that's a different story. I told that one to my niece last week on Christmas Eve. The elves told Dave that they had been disguised as Fighting Tiger football players on his team and that they had admired his work for a long time. They then revealed to him that they had been sent by the football god himself, and apparently the god of everything else, to help the people of Louisiana to find jubilation and to help Dave himself receive what he had always deserved. And Dave responded, shitters full, before he gave the elves a courtesy flush. But before the 3 elves left Dave's bathroom, they revealed their names to him. Their names were Jamar, Justin, and Joey. And they told Dave of their desire to lead the Fighting Tigers of Louisiana to the greatest football season of all time. They also told Dave that this goal would never be achieved without his help. After all, said Joey, who was apparently the elf chief, defense wins championships. The next morning, Dave told his wife about the 3 elves and the football years ago. And when she learned of the elves' generosity, she said to Dave, "These elves have made us wealthy, Dave. We should find a way to repay them." She then proposed Dave and herself stay up all night and make magic footballs for the 3 elves and for all 82 of their Fighting Tiger footballer teammates. And so that's what they did. And the next day, Dave approached the elves, back in their human form, before practice, and gave to them all 85 magic footballs Dave and his wife had made the night before. And just 3 months later, the 3 elves and their 82 Fighting Tiger footballer teammates used the magic footballs to win the football championship, and they were proclaimed greatest football team of all time. And Elf Joey was named greatest player, in his human form, of course. They accomplished all of this by playing with their great big balls, the magic footballs given to them by Dave. The elves were then made happy, and since they were no longer in their human form allowed by the football god to play for the amateur Fighting Tigers, they all left Louisiana, and moved on. Elf Joey and Elf Jamar went together north to the land of the cursed Tigers who could never win. And Elf Justin went even further north to the land of the Vikings. After the championship, though, something wonderful happened. Dave was approached by the wealthy people of Bayland across the Big Red River in the land of East Texas. They wanted him to lead their football team, and he would be allowed to make footballs however he saw fit. And of course, they would pay Dave lots and lots and lots of gold coins, which he could use to provide for his family for many generations. And so Dave left Louisiana and went to the realm of Bayland, abode of the green and gold bears. And there he made footballs, earned lots of gold coins, and ran his own football team, coaching his football players as he saw fit. And one day, after the 12th moon, and on the eve of the new year, Dave's team from the realm of Bayland earned the right to square off against his old team, the Fighting Tigers of Louisiana. But alas, before the game was played, the scribe who was recording Dave's story ran out of ink for his quill. Inflation. And so we don't know who won the big game between Dave's green and gold bears and the legendary Fighting Tigers of Louisiana. Thus the story ends, with many far and wide left wanting answers. But nevertheless, 'tis said the people of Louisiana never forgot Dave the Magic Football Maker, and they never forgot how he helped them field the greatest football team of all time. And so the moral of the story remains the same, regardless of the game's outcome. And that is, never give up hope and never forget when someone helps you. All right, Arthur, I'll say it. He wants me to give his interpretation of the moral of this story in his own words. And that is, sometimes people don't think it be like it does, but it do. From Arthur, the Bayou Party Dog, and from me, Ruddy Rutledge, Happy New Year, everybody. He is a real good boy, and this is some Bayou football.